Jacob's life journey is one marked by extraordinary twists of fate, profound spiritual encounters, and transformation. As the son of Isaac and grandson of Abraham, Jacob was born into a family destined by God for greatness, a lineage blessed with a divine covenant that promised them to be the root of a great nation. Yet, despite these promises, Jacob's journey would be anything but simple. His name itself, Jacob, meaning heel grabber or supplanter, hinted at the struggles that would characterize his early life. From the moment he emerged, clutching his twin brother Esau's heel, Jacob's life was defined by rivalry and conflict. The contentious bond with Esau grew even more strained as they matured. The Bible details how, with encouragement from his mother Rebekah, Jacob deceived his father Isaac to obtain the blessing intended for Esau, the firstborn. This act of deception caused a deep rift, one that sent Jacob into exile, separated from his family. Escaping to his uncle Laban's household, Jacob entered a phase of life where he, too, would experience trickery and hardship. During this time, however, Jacob's character began to evolve as he experienced several encounters with God. A particularly profound moment occurred at Bethel, where God reaffirmed the covenant made to Abraham and Isaac, promising Jacob that his descendants would be as countless as the dust of the earth. Before we continue exploring Jacob's life, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel. If you're finding inspiration in this biblical journey, your support allows us to bring you more scripture-rooted educational content. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're always updated on our latest episodes. As Jacob's journey continued, it became evident that he was not only marked by struggle, but was also destined for profound transformation. After many years of hard labor under his uncle Laban, Jacob yearned to return home, hoping to reconcile with his estranged brother Esau. This longing for peace reflected Jacob's inner growth, shifting from a life of deception to becoming someone ready to face the consequences of his past actions. On his journey back, Jacob encountered God once again, this time in the form of a mysterious man with whom he wrestled through the entire night. This encounter was not just a physical struggle, it symbolized Jacob's lifelong internal battle with his identity and his place within God's plan. At dawn, God blessed him and bestowed upon him a new name, Israel, meaning he who struggles with God. This new name was more than just a title. It marked a transformation in Jacob's destiny. He was no longer merely a man who took from others. He was now chosen by God to be the father of a nation. Jacob's 12 sons were more than just names within the Bible's genealogies. They became the foundation stones of Israel's tribes. Each of Jacob's sons contributed to the unfolding story of his family, with their unique roles, birth order, and mothers shaping the identity of their descendants. Together, their legacies would eventually define the nation of Israel, with the 12 tribes bearing their names. These legacies are not only preserved in biblical history, but are also deeply woven into the blessings and prophecies delivered by both Jacob and Moses. To grasp their importance, we must first understand that each of Jacob's 12 sons not only contributed to Israel's physical expansion, but also embodied distinct traits, strengths, and challenges that shaped the nation's identity. These sons were born to Jacob by 4 women, his wives, Leah and Rachel, and their maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah. This complex family structure fostered rivalries and divisions, establishing a dynamic in which each son sought recognition and favor. Leah, who was less loved by Jacob, bore him 6 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, had 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, gave birth to Dan and Naphtali, while Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, bore Gad and Asher. Together, these 12 men became the forefathers of the tribes that would ultimately settle and define the territories of the Promised Land. The significance of Jacob's sons goes beyond simple familial ties. Each son symbolized a different aspect of human nature and the wide array of experiences found in any large family. Their lives were filled with moments of courage and leadership, as well as episodes of deceit and betrayal. The interactions and rivalries among the brothers not only shaped their relationships, but also foreshadowed the conflicts and alliances that would later emerge between their tribes. Although they were all sons of Jacob, their status and blessings varied. Reuben, as the firstborn, was originally entitled to the birthright and a double inheritance. Yet his actions cost him that privilege, and leadership passed to others. Simeon and Levi, known for their fierce tempers, lost favor due to acts of violence. Judah, though the fourth-born, rose to prominence and leadership, becoming the ancestor of King David and, ultimately, Jesus Christ. Joseph, favored by his father, received a special blessing that extended to his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, effectively creating two tribes from his line. Benjamin, the youngest, was the last to receive his father's blessing, and his tribe became renowned for its fierce warriors. In each of these 12 sons, we see a reflection of Israel's strengths, flaws, and diversity, a foundation that would carry the identity of a nation. Each of Jacob's sons embodies a facet of the intricate spiritual and social foundation that God used to establish his people. Their strengths and weaknesses, along with the unique roles they played in God's unfolding plan, serve as lessons in faith, obedience, and the consequences of human choices. Some received blessings of leadership, while others were warned of future strife and challenges. Yet all were destined to build the nation that would carry forward the covenant God made with Abraham. Through these 12 men, Jacob's family transformed into a nation called to be a light to all other nations. Understanding the roles of Jacob's sons is essential to grasping the broader narrative of the Old Testament. The structure and division of the tribes shaped Israel's history for centuries. Each tribe developed its own identity, strengths, and challenges, weaving together a collective story that interlinked with the rise and fall of Israel as a kingdom. The prophecies and blessings given to each son by Jacob and later by Moses were not merely predictions of their personal fates, they were declarations of the character and destiny of the tribes that would bear their names. The number 12 itself holds symbolic significance in biblical theology, signifying completeness and order, often associated with the fulfillment of God's promises. The 12 sons, therefore, are not just a lineage, they represent God's intricate plan for his people. This symbolism resonates throughout Scripture, from the 12 tribes of Israel to the 12 disciples of Jesus, and even to the 12 gates of the New Jerusalem, described in Revelation. Each son's place in the family was intentional, and each tribe's role in Israel's history was divinely ordained to reflect a deeper spiritual reality. Now that we've identified Jacob's 12 sons, let's delve into their individual characteristics and the specific blessings they received. Reuben, the firstborn son of Jacob and Leah, held a privileged place within the family. At that time, firstborn status came with distinct rights and responsibilities, often referred to as the birthright. This status meant a double portion of the inheritance, leadership over his brothers, and the expectation that he would carry forward the family legacy. However, Reuben's story ultimately became one of lost potential. A single grave mistake would overshadow his birthright and lead to his fall from favor. From the beginning, Reuben seemed destined for greatness. As Leah's firstborn, he was a source of pride for his mother, who longed for Jacob's affection. His name, meaning "behold, a son," reflected Leah's hope that his birth would finally secure her place in Jacob's heart. Reuben's early years showed promise, with a natural sense of responsibility fitting for his role as the firstborn. He likely felt the weight of his position, knowing he was expected to lead his brothers and uphold his family's honor. One example of his budding leadership came during a crisis with his younger brother Joseph. When the other brothers, driven by jealousy, plotted to end Joseph's life, Reuben was the one who intervened. He persuaded them to spare Joseph, proposing they leave him in a pit instead. Secretly, Reuben planned to return later and free his brother, aiming to prevent any bloodshed. Yet, despite these signs of integrity, Reuben's life took a tragic turn. In a moment of impulsive defiance, he crossed a line that would cost him everything. He made a fateful choice to sleep with Bilhah, his father's concubine and the mother of two of his younger brothers, Dan and Naphtali. This act was more than a lapse in judgment. It was a profound betrayal that challenged his father Jacob's authority and shook the family to its core. At that time, such an act was often seen as a power play, an assertion of dominance. But for Reuben, this wasn't about power. It was a reckless decision that laid bare his own struggles with control and responsibility. Though Jacob didn't immediately confront his eldest son, he was deeply hurt, and the trust between them was irrevocably damaged. Reuben's actions undermined the honor of his family and showed a disregard for the high responsibility he was meant to uphold as the eldest son. The Bible doesn't record much of Reuben's reflections on this period, but the lack of response from him speaks volumes. He did not defend himself or try to rationalize his actions. Gradually, he faded into the background, his voice and influence eclipsed by brothers like Judah and Joseph. His downfall was not marked by dramatic clashes, but by a slow, quiet withdrawal as his place in the family diminished. Years later, when Jacob gathered his sons to impart final blessings, he addressed Reuben directly, with words that were as sorrowful as they were stern. In Genesis 49, Jacob spoke, "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch." With these words, Jacob captured the tragedy of Reuben's life. Although he was Jacob's firstborn, a man blessed with potential and promise, Reuben's instability and lack of self-restraint ultimately rendered him unfit for the leadership he was meant to embody. The phrase "unstable as water" stands out. Water is vital and life-giving, yet it's also unpredictable and, when left unchecked, capable of great destruction. Reuben, too, had vitality and passion, but lacked the discipline to direct his strengths effectively. Simeon's fiery temperament came to the forefront in one of the Bible's most violent episodes involving Jacob's sons, the massacre at Shechem. This incident unfolded when Dinah, Jacob's only daughter and Simeon's sister, was violated by Shechem, the prince of the region. Driven by his desire for Dinah, Shechem sought her hand in marriage, and his father, Hamor, approached Jacob to propose an alliance. But to Simeon and Levi, Dinah's full brothers, the dishonor inflicted upon their sister demanded more than a diplomatic solution. It called for retribution, swift and severe. Feigning cooperation, Simeon and Levi devised a plan. They proposed that they would agree to the marriage if every male in Shechem city underwent circumcision. Driven by the promise of an alliance, the men of Shechem consented, enduring the painful procedure. Then, on the third day, while the men were still recovering, Simeon and Levi took up their swords and launched a brutal assault, slaughtering every male, including Shechem and his father Hamor. They then ransacked the city, seizing women, children, and possessions as spoils. The act of vengeance Simeon and Levi unleashed shocked not only the people of Shechem, but also their father Jacob. When Jacob learned of their actions, he confronted them with sharp rebuke. "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the inhabitants of the land. My numbers are few, and if they gather against me and attack, I and my household will be destroyed." Yet, Simeon and Levi remained unapologetic. Their response was cold and defiant. "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" This response reveals the depth of Simeon's anger and his fierce sense of family honor. However, it also underscores his inability to consider the wider consequences of his actions. In that moment, Simeon's fury clouded his judgment. His sense of justice, though understandable, was excessive, turning into an act of brutal vengeance that tarnished his reputation and darkened his future. Jacob's fear was well-founded. Such violent actions could have easily provoked neighboring tribes to retaliate. It was only by God's intervention that nearby peoples were struck with fear, sparing Jacob's family from immediate reprisal. Yet, while Simeon and Levi avoided immediate consequences, their father never forgot this dark episode. Simeon's downfall, unlike Reuben's, wasn't tied to a single personal failing. It was rooted in unchecked rage and a drive for revenge. In his zeal to uphold his sister's honor, Simeon crossed a line that stained the family name. Although Jacob did not immediately strip Simeon of his status, he would address this transgression years later when blessing his sons. After the massacre, Simeon fades somewhat from the story, though his fiery nature remains. This streak of cruelty and impulsiveness reemerges later in his treatment of his younger brother, Joseph. Like his other brothers, Simeon harbored resentment towards Joseph, driven by jealousy over their father's favoritism and Joseph's dreams that one day hinted he would rule over them all. Once the men of Shechem agreed and were weakened by the painful procedure, Levi and Simeon seized the moment to exact their revenge. The brothers took up their swords and slaughtered every male in the city. This massacre was more than a mere act of vengeance for Dinah. It was a calculated display of retribution. They went further, plundering the city, taking women and children as captives, and seizing all the livestock and goods. Levi, in particular, appeared to be driven by an intense zeal to reclaim his family's honor, regardless of the cost. But in crossing this line, he permanently damaged his relationship with his father and cast a shadow over his family. When Jacob learned of the massacre, he was horrified and consumed by anger. Rather than feeling pride in the vengeance Simeon and Levi had taken, Jacob felt an overwhelming sense of shame and fear for the future of his family. He rebuked his two sons, saying, "You have made me a stench to the people of this land. I and my household might be destroyed." Despite Jacob's reaction, Levi showed no remorse. Like Simeon, he saw his actions as justifiable and essential, believing that avenging his sister's honor outweighed the risks. This fierce commitment to family loyalty revealed an intense, yet uncontrolled temperament. In Levi's eyes, upholding family dignity was worth defying his father and endangering them all. This unwavering zeal characterized Levi's early years, overshadowing his potential and clouding his legacy. Jacob's disappointment became unmistakably clear years later when he gathered his sons to impart his final blessings. To Levi, instead of praise or promise, Jacob delivered a stark condemnation. "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." With these words, Jacob effectively removed Levi from any position of leadership among his brothers and foretold a future where Levi's descendants would be divided and scattered throughout Israel. Levi's anger, though driven by loyalty, was ultimately condemned as it was untamed and destructive. His passionate nature, without the guidance of wisdom or self-restraint, became a danger not only to himself but to his family. While his zeal could have served a noble purpose, without control, it led only to chaos and bloodshed. Levi's condemnation seemed final, a fate marked by lost potential and broken hopes. For a while, his story indeed appeared to be one of irreversible disgrace. However, unlike Simeon, who remained entangled in cycles of conflict and obscurity, Levi's intense nature was ultimately redirected toward a higher, sacred purpose. Generations later, under the leadership of Moses, the destiny of Levi's descendants took a transformative turn. During the Israelites' wilderness journey, a defining moment arrived for the tribe of Levi. When Israel fell into idolatry, worshiping the golden calf at Mount Sinai, the Levites made a decisive stand. They rallied to Moses, standing against the sin of their people and executing God's judgment upon the rebels. This act of zeal mirrored Levi's earlier fervor, but this time it was channeled in a way that aligned with the divine purpose. In recognition of their loyalty and commitment to righteousness, the Levites were set apart for a special role in Israel's worship. Moses declared, "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day." This marked a profound transformation in the legacy of Levi's tribe. Where they had once been known for violence, they were now consecrated as priests and custodians of the tabernacle. The Levites became responsible for teaching the law, offering sacrifices, and upholding the sanctity of Israel's worship practices. Levi's story, initially marred by shame and condemnation, was thus redeemed. Despite the curse Jacob had spoken over him, Levi's descendants rose to become the nation's spiritual leaders. Though the tribe of Levi was scattered and given no land inheritance like the other tribes, their role was even more significant. They were granted the privilege of serving directly in God's presence. In this way, Jacob's prophecy was fulfilled not as a punishment, but as a means of dispersing the Levites among all the tribes of Israel, ensuring they could teach and uphold God's law across the entire nation. Levi's life serves as a powerful testament to the complex nature of zeal. When uncontrolled, his intense passion led to violence and chaos. Yet, when refined and aligned with God's will, that same passion became a source of strength and dedication, transforming Levi's legacy into one of service. Judah, the fourth son of Jacob and Leah, also stands out in the biblical narrative, though his path is markedly different. His story is one of profound change, from a man who stumbled morally to a figure of leadership and redemption. Unlike his elder brothers, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, whose impulsive decisions led to their disgrace, Judah's journey reveals growth and transformation, making him a powerful example of the redemptive power of repentance. From birth, Judah's role in the family seemed overshadowed. As the fourth son, he held no immediate claim to leadership or birthright privileges, which were traditionally reserved for the firstborn. Yet, he was born into a family rife with rivalry and emotional conflict. His mother, Leah, named him Judah, meaning praise, expressing her gratitude to God amidst her ongoing struggle for Jacob's affection. Judah's early years, much like his brothers, were shaped by the intense family dynamics and competition for their father's favor. Judah's first defining act in the biblical narrative unfolds in the story of Joseph. Fueled by jealousy and resentment, the brothers plotted to kill Joseph, their younger brother and Jacob's favored son, who had repeatedly shared dreams that suggested he would rule over them one day. In a pivotal moment, however, it was Judah who broke from the plot to kill Joseph, suggesting instead a less violent, albeit still harsh, alternative. He proposed that they sell Joseph to a passing caravan of Ishmaelite traders, sparing their brother's life while ridding themselves of him. This choice, though far from noble, showed the beginnings of a shift in Judah's character, a willingness to reconsider and an aversion to needless bloodshed. Judah's reasoning to his brothers was straightforward. What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. This suggestion, though practical and profitable, remained an act of betrayal, setting in motion years of heartache for both their father and Joseph. Judah's decision to sell Joseph, rather than kill him, was not motivated by compassion, but by convenience. It was a choice that, while sparing Joseph's life, would haunt Judah in the years that followed. After they sold Joseph, the brothers concocted a cruel deception. They presented Joseph's blood-stained robe to Jacob, allowing him to believe that a wild animal had killed his beloved son. Judah, alongside his brothers, watched as their father's grief consumed him. For years, Judah bore the weight of this lie, aware of his role in Joseph's suffering and Jacob's heartbreak. In the aftermath of Joseph's sale, Judah's life took a difficult and painful turn. The Bible briefly shifts focus to highlight Judah's character and journey toward redemption. After the incident with Joseph, Judah distanced himself from his family and settled in Canaan, where he married a Canaanite woman. Together, they had 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. Tragedy soon struck Judah's family. His eldest son, was described as wicked in the eyes of the Lord and was struck down, leaving his wife, Tamar, a widow. Following the custom of levirate marriage, Judah instructed his second son, Onan, to marry Tamar to provide an heir for his deceased brother. However, Onan refused to fulfill this duty, and the Lord punished him as well, leaving Tamar twice widowed and childless. Fearing for the life of his youngest son, Shelah, Judah withheld him from Tamar, breaking his promise to provide her with a husband. This neglect left Tamar in a desperate situation, without a husband or children, a vulnerable position in ancient society. However, Tamar, determined to secure her rights and continue the family lineage, devised a bold plan. Disguising herself as a prostitute, she waited by the roadside until Judah came by. Not recognizing her, Judah approached Tamar and offered payment for her services, unaware of the trap he was setting for himself. Later, when Tamar revealed that she was pregnant, Judah, oblivious to his involvement, condemned her to death for immorality. In a dramatic turn, Tamar presented Judah's own seal, cord, and staff, items he had given as a pledge during their encounter. Confronted with undeniable proof of his hypocrisy, Judah was forced to face his actions. In a moment of profound honesty, he admitted, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." This confession marked a turning point in Judah's life. For the first time, he openly acknowledged his wrongdoing and took responsibility for his actions. This encounter with Tamar was transformative for Judah. It represented a moment of deep personal failure, but also a breakthrough of humility and repentance. Judah's willingness to admit his sin and recognize Tamar's righteousness signified a change in his character. From this point on, Judah began to emerge as a man who understood the weight of his choices and the necessity of integrity. Judah's transformation would be tested years later when famine drove Jacob's family to seek sustenance in Egypt, where an unexpected reunion awaited. By then, Joseph, the brother they had sold into slavery, had risen to a position of great power as the governor of Egypt. When the brothers arrived, unaware of Joseph's identity, they pleaded for grain, not realizing that their fate now rested in the hands of the brother they had once betrayed. Joseph, testing his brothers, demanded that they bring Benjamin, the youngest and most beloved son, back to Egypt as proof of their honesty. This demand placed Judah in an agonizing position. Years earlier, he had been complicit in selling Joseph into slavery. Now, he faced the potential loss of another brother, one whom his father held closest to his heart. But Judah had changed. He stepped forward with a surprising offer, pledging to protect Benjamin with his life. He promised Jacob, "I myself will be surety for him. You can hold me responsible forever if I do not bring him back." This was no longer the same Judah who had once sold his brother out of convenience. Now, he was a man prepared to sacrifice himself to protect his family. When Joseph, still in disguise, staged a scene to make it seem as though Benjamin had stolen a valuable cup, Judah again stepped up to plead for his brother's life. In one of the Bible's most heartfelt speeches, Judah offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. "Please let your servant remain here, as my lord's slave in place of the boy," he implored, "and let the boy return with his brothers." Judah's plea was filled with genuine remorse for his past sins and a deep empathy for his father's suffering. His self-sacrificial offer revealed the depth of his transformation, marking him as a man capable of true repentance and love. This act of intercession finally broke through Joseph's defenses. Overcome by his brother's willingness to lay down his life for Benjamin, Joseph revealed his true identity and embraced his brothers in forgiveness. Judah's willingness to stand in the gap for Benjamin was a powerful contrast to his earlier betrayal of Joseph. This selfless act showed that he had truly transformed and was now equipped with the leadership and compassion Jacob's family so deeply needed. Judah's journey is one of the Bible's most compelling examples of personal redemption. Once a man willing to sell his own brother and deceive his father, Judah emerged through painful trials and sincere repentance as a leader ready to sacrifice himself for others. His story highlights the transformative power of humility and the potential for change, even after monumental failures. It's no wonder that Judah's lineage was chosen for kingship, as he became the ancestor of King David and, ultimately, the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Judah received a distinct blessing from Jacob. "Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? Nothing. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." This blessing foretold Judah's rise to leadership and his enduring legacy. Jacob envisioned Judah's descendants taking on a royal role, symbolized by the lion, the king of beasts, marking Judah's tribe as a pillar of strength and sovereignty in Israel's story. The reference to the scepter in Judah's blessing hinted at the line of kings that would emerge from his lineage, reaching its peak with King David and ultimately with the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Judah's tribe would go on to lead the southern kingdom and become the core of Israel's spiritual and political life. Dan, the fifth son of Jacob, was the firstborn of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant. His name, meaning to judge, was chosen by Rachel, expressing her hope that God had recognized her struggles and blessed her with a son through her servant. Rachel's choice to name him Dan was filled with longing and expectation, as she herself was struggling with barrenness. For Rachel, Dan's birth represented a victory in her rivalry with her sister Leah. Yet, the symbolism behind Dan's name unfolded in unexpected ways within his life and in the legacy of his descendants. Dan's role in the family was unique. As the son of a concubine, he lacked the status and privilege of Leah and Rachel's sons. Nevertheless, he is described as one who would judge his people, suggesting a role imbued with responsibility and authority. However, Dan's story in the Bible remains somewhat elusive, with most of our understanding coming from the prophecies given by his father Jacob and later by Moses. One of the most intriguing aspects of Dan's character appears in Jacob's blessing in Genesis 49, where he says, "Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent, by the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backward. This blessing is both mysterious and ominous, using imagery that implies both strength and treachery. The portrayal of Dan as a serpent, cunning and dangerous, reveals a darker aspect of his nature, one that would later echo in the history of his tribe. Although called to a role of leadership, Dan ultimately became a symbol of deception and unpredictability within Israel's story. The tribe of Dan, although initially positioned to judge and protect Israel, eventually fell into idolatry and moral compromise, bringing idol worship into the land. Dan's story, though brief, serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of wielding power without integrity. His tribe's descent into idolatry became a lasting stain on their legacy, marking them as a tribe that strayed from God's path. The imagery of the serpent in Jacob's blessing foreshadowed the future struggles of the tribe, illustrating that, without wisdom and righteousness, even those appointed to lead can become instruments of destruction. Naphtali, the sixth son of Jacob, was also born through Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, making him Dan's full brother. His name, meaning my struggle, was chosen by Rachel to symbolize the intense competition she felt with her sister Leah. Still barren and longing to bear children herself, Rachel viewed Naphtali's birth as a personal victory in her ongoing rivalry. The name Naphtali captures both Rachel's internal wrestling and the hope that his birth was a sign of God's favor. In contrast to some of his brothers, Naphtali's story in the Bible is peaceful and uneventful. There are no records of him engaging in major family conflicts, nor is there a dramatic tale of downfall or redemption attached to him. Instead, his legacy is characterized by his distinct qualities and the traits associated with his descendants. Jacob's blessing for Naphtali is brief but rich in imagery. Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. This image of a free and graceful doe conveys swiftness, agility, and a sense of freedom, qualities that were highly esteemed in the ancient world. The mention of beautiful words hints at eloquence, suggesting that Naphtali and his descendants were gifted with communication and expression. While many of Jacob's other sons are depicted as warriors, leaders, or laborers, Naphtali's blessing highlights creativity and expression. The blend of grace and eloquence suggests a gentler nature, one centered on sharing joy and wisdom rather than conquest or judgment. Naphtali's legacy represents a unique balance within Jacob's family. He is not remembered for strength or valor in battle, but rather for his freedom and expressive spirit. The tribe of Naphtali, renowned for their speed and bravery, eventually settled in the fertile region near the Sea of Galilee, an area celebrated for its natural beauty and abundance. While other tribes often contended with internal disputes and external threats, Naphtali's descendants enjoyed a degree of freedom and stability that mirrored the peaceful nature hinted at in Jacob's blessing. Gad, the seventh son of Jacob and the firstborn of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, was welcomed with joy by Leah, who declared, "What good fortune!" Gad's name derives from the Hebrew word for good fortune, or troop, a reflection of Leah's happiness at gaining another son in her rivalry with Rachel. This name, implying a troop, proved prophetic, as Gad's descendants became known for their military skill and bravery. Like Naphtali, Gad's individual story in the Bible is relatively understated, lacking personal dramas or notable conflicts. Yet his legacy is one of strength and resilience. Jacob's blessing for Gad is succinct but impactful. Gad, a troop shall troop upon him, but he shall triumph at last. This prophecy suggests a tribe that would face attacks and adversity, but ultimately prevail. The repetition of troop underscores the tribe's martial spirit, as Gad's people would go on to be known as fierce and resilient warriors, capable of enduring and triumphing over their enemies. The tribe of Gad settled on the east side of the Jordan River, an area that exposed them to frequent threats from neighboring forces. This vulnerable location required Gad's descendants to be ever vigilant and prepared to defend their land. Consequently, they earned a reputation for bravery and combat expertise, often serving as the frontline defenders for the entire nation of Israel. The men of Gad were described as valiant and mighty warriors, able to stand their ground even when faced with overwhelming odds. Though Gad's story may lack personal drama, it stands as a powerful testament to endurance and strength. Unlike Judah, who was destined for leadership, or Levi, who took on a spiritual role, Gad's contribution to the family and the nation was his unwavering courage. He and his descendants exemplified resilience, embodying the essence of his name, a troop that would fight tirelessly and ultimately prevail. Asher, the eighth son of Jacob and the second son of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, entered the world with a name that means happy or blessed. Leah chose this name with joy, exclaiming, "How happy I am! The women will call me happy." Asher's name reflected Leah's satisfaction at bearing another son, strengthening her position in the ongoing family rivalry with Rachel. Unlike some of his brothers, whose names and lives were marked by struggle or conflict, Asher's name embodied joy and contentment from the start. While Asher's role in the biblical narrative is less prominent than some of his siblings, the blessings he received were remarkable. Jacob's blessing over Asher is one of the most positive among his sons. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. This blessing implies abundance, prosperity, and a life filled with the finest things. Asher is depicted as a man of peace and plenty, whose descendants would live in fertile lands, yielding an abundance of food and resources. Moses' blessing over the tribe of Asher later reinforced these themes. He proclaimed, "Most blessed of sons is Asher. Let him be favored by his brothers, and let him dip his foot in oil." This imagery of dipping his foot in oil likely points to the prosperity and richness of the land that the tribe would inherit. Asher's territory, located in the lush and fertile region along the Mediterranean coast of Canaan, was renowned for its olive groves, vineyards, and rich soil, making it a symbol of prosperity and high-quality produce. The land of Asher became synonymous with wealth and abundance, allowing the tribe to serve as providers, not only for themselves, but for others as well. Asher's story, though not filled with dramatic events, serves as a reminder that God's blessings can manifest in peaceful and abundant living. His descendants enjoyed the good things of the land, embodying the happiness and richness that his name signified. Unlike other tribes who were known for their conflicts and battles, Asher's legacy was one of contentment and joy, enriching the lives of those around them. Issachar, the ninth son of Jacob and Leah, was born under circumstances that underscored Leah's persistence and determination. His birth was the outcome of an unusual arrangement between Leah and Rachel. Desperate to bear more children and keep Jacob's attention, Leah traded some mandrakes, a plant believed to enhance fertility, to Rachel in exchange for a night with their husband Jacob. When Leah conceived, she named her son Issachar, meaning reward or hire, reflecting her belief that God had rewarded her perseverance and efforts. Although Issachar's story in the Bible lacks dramatic events, his nature and the characteristics of his descendants are revealed through the blessings given by both Jacob and Moses. Jacob's blessing describes Issachar as a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, so he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a servant at forced labor. This imagery paints Issachar as a tribe that is industrious and hardworking, willing to bear heavy burdens and serve others. The image of a strong donkey symbolizes both strength and humility, suggesting that Issachar's descendants would prioritize stability and the rewards of diligent labor over ambition or conquest. They were content to work the land and fulfill the needs of the people, making practical, long-term decisions for the tribe's benefit. Unlike the more aggressive, warlike tribes, Issachar focused on domestic prosperity and peaceful coexistence. However, Jacob's blessing also contains a note of caution. The phrase, "becoming a servant at forced labor," hints at a potential downside to Issachar's nature, a tendency to sacrifice freedom for the sake of comfort and security. This characteristic manifested in their later history, as the tribe of Issachar sometimes found itself subservient to stronger tribes or external powers. Their contentment could lead to complacency, making them vulnerable to domination. Yet, the tribe of Issachar was also renowned for its wisdom and understanding. Moses' blessing highlights their scholarly disposition, stating, "They shall summon peoples to the mountain. There they offer sacrifices of righteousness." Issachar's descendants were regarded as people of insight and discernment, known for producing wise leaders and scholars who contributed significantly to Israel's spiritual and intellectual growth. They were frequently consulted for guidance and judgment, embodying a rare blend of physical strength and mental acuity, making Issachar's tribe a stabilizing force in Israel and a valued source of wisdom and leadership. Issachar's story, therefore, is one of balance, strength coupled with humility, service paired with wisdom. His tribe became a stabilizing force in Israel, embodying values of hard work, knowledge, and the pursuit of righteousness. Zebulun, the 10th son of Jacob and Leah, was born after Issachar. Leah named him Zebulun, meaning dwelling or honor, as a hope that Jacob would now honor her for bearing him 6 sons. Though Zebulun's personal story is not detailed in the Bible, his destiny and the role of his tribe are outlined in the blessings given by Jacob and Moses. Jacob's blessing speaks to Zebulun's future in terms of trade and maritime pursuits. Zebulun shall dwell at the shore of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. This blessing suggests that Zebulun's descendants would be connected to the sea, engaging in trade and commerce. Unlike other tribes whose primary focus was agriculture and livestock, Zebulun would stand out for its mercantile activities, leveraging its strategic coastal location. Zebulun's proximity to the sea and major trade routes offered them access to wealth and influence. His descendants became not only skilled traders, but also intermediaries who connected Israel to foreign nations, bringing in goods and resources otherwise hard to acquire. The mention of Sidon, a significant Phoenician city, implies that Zebulun's territory extended into areas that facilitated international interactions, positioning the tribe as a key economic player within Israel. Moses' blessing reinforces this idea, stating, "Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents." This blessing celebrates Zebulun's adventurous spirit and success in trade, while also highlighting the complementary roles of Zebulun and Issachar. While Issachar focused on agriculture and local stability, Zebulun thrived in trade and exploration, together symbolizing a balance between domestic growth and international engagement. Zebulun's legacy, though quieter than some of his brothers, is one of enterprise and opportunity. His descendants took on the challenges of the sea and commerce, bringing both prosperity and honor to their tribe. Their contributions to Israel's economic stability and their role as a bridge to the broader world made them invaluable, not only for the resources they supplied, but also for the connections they fostered. Joseph, Jacob's 11th son and Rachel's firstborn, entered a family already tangled in rivalry, jealousy, and clear favoritism. But unlike his older brothers, children of Leah, Zilpah, and Bilhah, Joseph's arrival brought unparalleled joy to Jacob, as Rachel, the wife he held most dear, had long struggled with barrenness. Joseph became especially precious to Jacob, who cherished him deeply due to Rachel's hardships in conceiving. This special treatment became obvious quickly, igniting tensions among his brothers. From early on, Joseph stood out, not only for Jacob's visible preference, but also due to his unique character and prophetic dreams. Jacob openly displayed his affection by gifting Joseph a lavish, colorful robe, a garment that symbolized his favored status and future leadership potential, despite being one of the youngest. This extravagant display further fueled his brother's resentment and bitterness. The robe, more than just vibrant clothing, represented a position of honor and authority, hinting that Joseph was being prepared for a prominent role. Joseph's situation grew even more strained as he began to experience vivid dreams, hinting at a future where he would wield great power and his family would bow to him. In one dream, Joseph saw bundles of grain, each representing his brothers, bowing to his own upright bundle. In another, he envisioned the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing before him, symbolizing his parents and siblings. When Joseph shared these dreams, it only intensified his brothers' hostility. To them, it was the height of arrogance that their younger brother envisioned himself as ruler over them. Even Jacob, though deeply loving toward Joseph, was momentarily taken aback and rebuked him, though he privately wondered if the dreams held deeper meaning. As these tensions built, the brothers' jealousy eventually reached a breaking point. One day, when Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers as they tended the flock far from home, they saw a chance to finally rid themselves of the dreamer. Seeing him approach, clad in his unmistakable robe, the brothers plotted against him. "Here comes that dreamer," they mocked. "Let's kill him and throw him into one of these pits," saying a wild animal devoured him. Reuben, the eldest, couldn't bear the thought of killing Joseph. Instead, he persuaded his brothers to throw Joseph into a pit, intending to rescue him later when they weren't watching. But while Reuben was away, Judah saw an opportunity. Rather than leaving Joseph to die, he suggested they sell him to passing Ishmaelite traders. This way, they would rid themselves of him without taking his life, and even make some money in the process. The brothers agreed to Judah's plan and sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver, betraying their own flesh and blood. They stripped him of his cherished robe and handed him over to the traders, who took Joseph down to Egypt as a slave. To cover their tracks, the brothers devised a cruel ruse. They dipped Joseph's robe in goat's blood and brought it to Jacob, pretending to have found it. "Is this your son's robe?" they asked, feigning innocence. Jacob recognized the robe immediately and was overwhelmed with grief, believing his beloved Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. His sorrow was so intense that he refused all comfort, declaring that he would mourn Joseph until his own death. Meanwhile, Joseph's life in Egypt took a drastic turn. Sold to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, Joseph quickly distinguished himself through his integrity, skill, and wisdom. Even as a slave, his abilities were evident, and Potiphar entrusted him with managing his entire household. But just as Joseph found a place for himself, misfortune struck once more. Potiphar's wife, drawn to Joseph's good looks and character, tried to seduce him. Loyal to both God and his master, Joseph refused her advances. Angered by his rejection, she falsely accused him of assault. As a result, Joseph was thrown into prison, seemingly abandoned and forgotten. Yet, even in prison, his steadfast faith and integrity shone through. He gained the trust of the prison warden, who placed him in charge of the other prisoners. During his time in prison, Joseph's unique gift for interpreting dreams emerged. He accurately interpreted the dreams of two of Pharaoh's officials, the cupbearer and the baker, who had been imprisoned. For the cupbearer, Joseph foresaw a return to his position, while for the baker, he predicted a tragic end. Both interpretations came true exactly as Joseph had described. Joseph asked the cupbearer to remember him upon his release, hoping it might lead to his own freedom. But once restored to his position, the cupbearer forgot Joseph, leaving him in prison for 2 more years. Despite this, God had not forgotten Joseph. When Pharaoh began to experience troubling dreams that none of his advisors could interpret, the cupbearer finally recalled Joseph's gift and told Pharaoh about the young Hebrew prisoner. Pharaoh summoned Joseph, and in a single day, his life changed dramatically. Listening to Pharaoh's account of dreams involving 7 healthy cows devoured by 7 gaunt ones and 7 plump ears of grain swallowed by 7 thin ones, Joseph, with God's guidance, revealed the meaning. Egypt would experience 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Pharaoh, deeply impressed by Joseph's wisdom and foresight, elevated him to second in command over all of Egypt. Joseph, who had entered Egypt as a slave and endured years in prison, now held authority over the nation's resources, tasked with preparing for the looming crisis. His responsibilities included organizing the collection and storage of grain during the abundant years and overseeing its distribution during the anticipated famine. With his new position, Pharaoh granted him an Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah, and a wife, Asenath, the daughter of an esteemed Egyptian priest. Despite his newfound wealth, honor, and power, Joseph remained steadfast in his humility and devotion to God. When the famine eventually spread beyond Egypt, it reached the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his sons were struggling to survive. Hearing that Egypt had grain, Jacob sent his sons to purchase food, unaware that the powerful Egyptian official they would meet was none other than Joseph, the brother they had betrayed years before. Upon seeing his brothers, Joseph recognized them immediately, but they did not recognize him. Instead of revealing his identity, Joseph decided to test them, curious to see if they had changed. Through a series of orchestrated trials that mirrored the hardships they had inflicted on him, Joseph observed their behavior closely, concealing his true identity. When Joseph finally discerned their genuine remorse, particularly Judah, who offered himself as a substitute to spare Benjamin, he could no longer contain his emotions. In a tearful moment of revelation, he declared, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." His brothers were paralyzed with shock and fear, anticipating retribution. Yet Joseph, in an extraordinary display of forgiveness, reassured them, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Rather than seeking revenge, Joseph recognized the greater purpose woven into his suffering. God had used his trials to position him as a savior for his family and countless others during the devastating famine. Joseph's journey is a remarkable story of divine providence, resilience, and the transformative power of forgiveness. Rising from betrayal and imprisonment to authority and influence, he maintained his faith throughout every trial. His willingness to forgive his brothers exemplifies grace, demonstrating that God can bring redemption even from the darkest circumstances. The blessing Jacob pronounced over Joseph was profound, emphasizing his fruitfulness and divine favor. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring whose branches climb over a wall. Because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, the blessings of your father are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Joseph's life journey, marked by hardship and resilience, culminated in a blessing that set him apart, with his descendants, through Ephraim and Manasseh, forming two influential tribes, each granted a portion of inheritance, doubling Joseph's legacy in Israel. Benjamin, Jacob's youngest and final son, entered the world amidst both celebration and sorrow. As Rachel's second son, his birth represented the fulfillment of her deepest wish. However, joy turned to heartbreak as Rachel's life ebbed away during labor. In her final moments, she named him Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow, reflecting the pain of her passing. Jacob, however, redefined this moment of loss, renaming him Benjamin, son of my right hand, as a tribute to both his grief and his desire for Benjamin to hold a position of honor and strength in the family. In Benjamin, the brothers found an opportunity for redemption, a chance to guard rather than betray. When famine swept through the land, leaving Jacob's family on the brink of starvation, Benjamin's place within the family took on even greater importance, setting the stage for an emotional and intense family reckoning. The brothers' journey to Egypt led them into a reunion they never anticipated, though they didn't recognize it at first. Sent by Jacob to buy grain, they stood before the Egyptian governor, none other than Joseph, the brother they had betrayed. Keeping his identity hidden, Joseph accused them of espionage, demanding proof of their honesty. To do so, he ordered them to bring their youngest brother, Benjamin, knowing this request would shake them to their core. The brothers were terrified, understanding the heartbreak they'd face upon asking Jacob to part with Benjamin, his beloved youngest. When they returned to Canaan and relayed Joseph's demand, Jacob was stricken with grief. "You have deprived me of my children," he cried. "Joseph is gone, Simeon is gone, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." Benjamin was more than just his son. He was a living piece of Rachel, a connection to the memory of the wife Jacob adored. Refusing to risk Benjamin's life, Jacob held firm until the famine worsened, leaving him no choice. Judah's solemn vow to protect Benjamin finally swayed him, and he allowed his youngest son to join the journey to Egypt. When the brothers returned, Joseph's reaction to seeing Benjamin was one of a deep, restrained emotion. His youngest brother, who had been a child when he was sold into slavery, now stood before him, innocent of the family's painful history. Joseph ordered a feast and arranged the brothers by birth order, subtly testing them. To everyone's surprise, he served Benjamin 5 times as much food. This act wasn't meant to provoke jealousy, but to see if they had changed since the days when envy drove their actions. The ultimate test, however, came as they departed. Joseph arranged for his silver cup to be hidden in Benjamin's sack. After they set off, his steward pursued them, accusing them of theft. The brothers, confident in their innocence, declared that any one of them found with the cup would become Joseph's slave. But when the cup was discovered in Benjamin's sack, shock and dread overtook them. Grieving and horrified, they tore their clothes and returned to Joseph's palace, desperate to plead for their brother's life. As Judah stood before Joseph, his promise to protect Benjamin took on a profound meaning. Offering himself as a substitute, he pleaded, "Please, let your servant remain here as my lord's slave instead of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers." This act of self-sacrifice marked Judah's transformation, a far cry from the man who had once suggested selling Joseph. Now, he was ready to lay down his own freedom to protect his family. Seeing his brothers' genuine remorse and the strength of their love for Benjamin, Joseph could no longer hold back his emotions. He ordered everyone else out of the room, and with tears streaming down, he revealed his true identity. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" Shocked and fearful, the brothers stood silent, but Joseph embraced Benjamin, both of them weeping for all the lost years. This reunion was more than a family reconciliation. It was a moment of healing. Benjamin, the innocent youngest son, became the bridge that brought Joseph and his brothers back together. His presence stirred compassion in his brothers, reflecting how much they had grown. Unlike Joseph, who had been forced to forge his path far from home, Benjamin remained close to Jacob, a source of comfort and hope. Through his vulnerability and innocence, Benjamin served as a reminder to his brothers of the love they had lost and the unity they could rebuild. Although Benjamin's story might seem less dramatic than that of his older brothers, his role was pivotal. He became a symbol of second chances, showing that even fractured relationships could be restored through forgiveness and grace. Jacob's final blessing to Benjamin underscored his tribe's dual nature. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the prey. In the evening, he divides the plunder. This prophecy pointed to a tribe known for its fierce warriors, destined for conquest, but also marked by inner conflicts that nearly led to self-destruction. Yet, through all their strengths and flaws, God used each of Jacob's sons to build the foundation of a people who would bear his name. As we reflect on their stories, we see that each son, though imperfect, played a unique role in God's plan. They remind us that no heart is beyond redemption, and no life is too broken for God to transform. In considering their lives and legacies, we find inspiration and challenge for our own journeys. As we close this journey through the lives of Jacob's sons, let's reflect on our own paths. Are we channeling our strengths and gifts toward a greater purpose? Do we let our past failures define us, or do we choose to pursue redemption and growth? Whether you identify with Reuben's turbulent passion, Levi's intense zeal, or Joseph's enduring faith, the message resonates. God can transform the broken pieces of our lives into a part of his greater plan. If this exploration into the lives of Jacob's sons has resonated with you, don't let it end here. Take a moment to like this video, share it with those who seek deeper insight, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels our mission to delve into these timeless lessons and helps us build a community dedicated to understanding and living out the Word of God. Join us in uncovering more biblical wisdom that speaks to our lives today. Together, we can learn, grow, and apply these lessons on our own journeys of faith. Click subscribe and become part of a family that, like the 12 sons who grew into a powerful nation, seeks to shape the world through wisdom and truth.